Hi. Believe it or not, school has been out for several weeks now, and I am still reflecting on issues and concerns that I had this past school year. What I wanted to do is just to touch base with, I think, about three golden nuggets that I wanted to share. And these three golden nuggets are, I guess, would be like best practice for basically any teacher, not just a special education teacher, but for any teacher. Any teacher can use these best practices. The three golden nuggets that I want to touch base on, of course, is having an agenda in place when you have a meeting with a parent. Document, document, and document. And also, basically, working on your paperwork in a timely manner. Like I mentioned before, I had a very, very stressful school term. This past school term was very, very stressful for me because I had several behavior concerns. I basically had a student that was very aggressive in the classroom. So when you talk about documentation, I basically had to document everything that was going on. So best practice, document, document, and document. Do not depend on your TAs or your paraprofessionals to document. You make sure that you document. Because there were times that I assumed that my TAs were documenting. They weren't. They weren't documenting the things that we had talked about. I would say, well, when these behaviors occur, I need for you to document the time, the place, what's going on. I had a student who was attacking me. And like I said, I depended on my TAs to document the behavior that was going on, and they weren't. So I had to make sure that I documented what was going on. I documented the time that these behaviors were occurring. I documented, you know, how forceful the student was toward me, where he was hitting me at, what the other students were doing, what time. And it's very frustrating to do these things when you're in the midst of helping a student calm down when they are in that stage of rage. But nevertheless, I documented. And after a while, I kind of got my TAs, on track with documentation. But document the who, the what, the when, the where, the how, and the why. Even if there are things that you think are insignificant, you need to document them, because things that may seem to be minor might be major, major things you need to consider, especially when you're talking about behavior and the occurrences of behaviors in your classroom. So document, document, document. I documented who was in my classroom. I documented when people were walking in and out of my classroom. I documented that. I documented the temperature in my classroom. I documented everything. Things, like I said, that are insignificant, may seem insignificant to you, may be a trigger, especially when you work with students that have autism spectrum disorders. If there was a day, there was one instance where I was wearing a kind of silk material. My blouse was made out of silk material. I didn't even think about the documentation of that material, but just the shininess of it, I guess, kind of triggered some things with that student. I had a situation where the foods class across the hall was cooking. They were cooking spaghetti. And I had an outburst of behavior. That student was hungry. And he took that frustration out on me, mainly because that was his way of communicating that he had a need. He was hungry. But, by that student having limited verbal ability, it wasn't clear until after we looked at the documentation. So document, 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 document everything. I documented things that my parents said. Like I said, things you think that are insignificant may be very significant in the end. So document. Another concern that I had when I had meetings, of course, was not having an agenda in place and having outside agencies basically come in and control the meeting. So one thing I would suggest is to have an agenda in place when you meet with parents, whether it be a parent conference or having an annual review. When you're working on your IEP, you have an IEP meeting, you're working on IEP paperwork, have an agenda in place. And that agenda should have like the basic information that all agendas should have. The time, the day of the meeting, the participants, who participated in the meeting, what was the focus of the meeting, and ultimately when you're going to meet again. And I would take notes on my copy of my agenda to help me remember the different topics that we talked about. One good thing about having an agenda in place is if you have an individual, let's say an outside agency, or if you have your parents, if your parents have a concern that they want to address, but is not the focus of what your meeting is about on that particular day, you take note of what that concern is, but you use your agenda to, to move your meeting. So if you have a concern that's brought up during during the meeting, you note it, and not being rude, you state to that parent or that outside agency, yes, I've noted your concern, but we will set another meeting so we can focus on this concern. And that is that. Like I said, you're not being rude or disrespectful, but you focus on what the purpose, you focus on the purpose of that meeting. What was your purpose? If you had a meeting talking about educational placement, and let's say the parent wanted to talk about testing, yes, of course, we're going to document that the parent requested testing, but we can't talk about testing at that meeting. We will do, whatever the protocol procedures are, we will follow through with that, but we cannot talk about testing. That's not the agenda. That's not on our agenda today. Like I said, I will follow through with what is protocol, but we would have to set another meeting to discuss, testing. We can't talk about testing if we don't have testing information. So there's a lot of things that you need to focus on when you're having a meeting. But just, going back to what the original conversation was, having an agenda in place and following that agenda. The third golden nugget basically is making sure that your paperwork is done in a timely manner and that it is correct. You cannot wait until the last minute to do your paperwork, especially if you are a self-contained teacher, self-contained setting teacher. Of course, we don't have a lot of time to work on paperwork because usually you do not have a planning period. And if you do have a planning period, it's not a long amount of time. So making sure that you plan accordingly for your meetings. How much time do you need to work on your paperwork? Who do you need to collaborate with in order to get your paperwork started and completed? When is the meeting? Do you have enough time to get the paperwork done? Do you have enough time to collaborate with your other members of the party? Do you have enough time to complete that paperwork? Keep all those things in mind when you are actually doing your paperwork. There are times that I have had annual reviews that after I type the information up and it goes in the system, that when it prints out, when the draft prints out, just the draft, not the final copy, the draft would be between 20 and 30 pages long. That's a lot of documentation. That's a lot of paperwork. So basically, make sure that your paperwork is correct. Make sure that it's done in a timely manner, and it will save you a whole lot of headache in the end. So basically, those are my 3 nuggets, my 3 golden nuggets, best practices that I wanted to share today. I hope the information that I shared was helpful to someone. And I'm going to be honest, just sharing the information, just sharing my best practices is helpful to me. Alright, so have a good day and be blessed. Bye-bye.